Can I move this?
That's weird.
Can I move the tripod now?
I'll do it.
No, I can move it. I just didn't want to get centered. I'm moving the angle or something.
No.
I have so much trouble with this, and it's my mind.
It looks like a gun, doesn't it?
Is, and because of this thing as
It didn't
well.
look like that to me until now.
Really? The handle with this, and that's what I
Thank you.
see sitting there. It's like, gosh, I'm in so much trouble with this.
Felt that one day we should just arrange cots all here at the Gompa and have like a tutorial while all of us are sleeping in our cots. I can tuck you in. Or beds. Yeah. Yeah. I'll tuck you in. I'll crawl into a fetal position and just.
Well, you can swag it on with the swag it on. They're responsive.
Yeah, Swagaton, yeah. I'll probably kind of win a prize for. Yeah. Sound sleeping.
Sounds sweet.
I guess that sound sleeping can go both ways. You can kind of be totally in deep sleep, or you can like snore like.
Well, that's what I was just trying to work out.
You know what Alan Wallace says, instruction is to people, because you know how it gets everyone lying down to meditate. He says, okay, if you fall asleep, it's your business, but if you snore, it's everyone else's business, so they've got permission to toggle your toes. Never seen you toggle anyone's toe, or anyone toggle anyone's toe, but I have heard them say.
I was asleep once in a meditation, and I was right next to him, right next to the leader, and he poked me, doing a stick. He came from his collar. Oh, poked me.
I guess.
Toes sounds much more pleasant.
I guess that you had it coming.
I have done this. Oh, no, it works. They just open up. It doesn't hurt. Yeah, I just open Who's the clever one?
Yeah, it's not real.
No, you can tell it's not real.
Okay.
We don't have to be told it's not real. Is that yours in here? Is that a note in here?
Yeah. I'll show you where. Did that happen?
Should we have sutra? What do you reckon?
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. I don't want to break your conversation. I'm just kind of. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in concentration and categories of non-alcoholic plant possession. At that time, the Bodhisattva looked upon the very practice of found perfection of wisdom and beheld those felt aggregates also as empty. Power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva. How should any son in lineage trained wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that in Bodhisattva Mahasattva said this to the Venerable Shariputra, son of the lineage of daughter of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon like this. Rightly and repeatedly beholding those found aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, composition, factors, consciousness are empty. Shariputra, phenomena are empty without unproduced, unsustainedness, not without stains, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no composition, factors, no consciousness. Ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sun, no other, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. Eye element and so on, up to including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to including no aging, no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattvas rely on divine perfection with the mind without obscuration, without fear, having completely passed beyond error to each All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awakened to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of the great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as truth and is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared. Tayata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisattva. Shariputra the Bodhisattva must find perfection for his enlightenment. In the Bhagavana was in that concentration commending the Bodhisattva. Arya Avalokiteshvara saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that, it is like that. Transition perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated, even the Tathagata. With that spoken, the Venerable Shariputra Masaka, Arya Avalokiteshvara, and the surrounding in the entirety along with the words of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas were overjoyed and highly praised as spoken by the Bhagavad. Sangye Chodan Sake Chanju Badu Dani Kyasuchi Dagi Chishegi Betso Nangi Dola Penchi Sangye Jopash Sangye Chodan Sake Chonam Chanju Badu Dani Kyasuchi Dagi Chishegi Betso Nangi Dola Penchi Sangye Jopash Chodan Soki Chonam La Chanchu Badu Jani Gyapsu Chi Dagi Jinsoki Betso Nangi Dola Penchi Sangye Jopa Sho. All right, let's do it. Huh? Okay, sorry. Quit. Okay, so what's on the menu? I wanted maybe to cover a couple of secondary faults and also to look at the taking of the minds of enlightenment as we covered in the previous week, and maybe to pull a couple of points that Geshe-la mentioned today in his session. That's about it. But to make sure that we, first of all, cover what Geshe-la spoke of in this session, and also in the previous session, let's start with that rather than starting with the secondary offenses. Have you got any questions to begin with? Questions, comments? Right. I think that in the previous week, the last thing that we've covered towards the end of the chute was the taking of the mind. So these were the two verses. I brought along with me the 6th session Guru Yoga. In verse A4 in the 6th session Guru Yoga, it says, Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and Gurus, please listen to what I have now say from the depth of my heart. Then it says, so this is the main part now. Just as all the Buddhas of the past developed the thought of enlightenment through bodhicitta, then practice these stages of greater development following the trainings for all Buddha children. So may too, for the sake of all beings, develop bodhicitta and follow the trainings exactly as all Bodhisattvas have done. So it's a different translation to what we have here in the commentary. Sorry?
It's the same translation as in our books.
Okay, it's the same translation as in the FEMT books.
It came from FEMT.
Yeah, I think it was translated by Alex Bezin, right?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it was translated by Alex Bezin, which has his own way of doing stuff. Let's see if there's a... Doesn't say here anything. Anyway, so we said that these two verses can be divided into the parts that are related to the aspiring and to the engaging mind of enlightenment. So just as the previous Tathagatas generated the mind of enlightenment, And in the next verse, I should generate the mind of enlightenment for the welfare of sentient beings. That pertains to the aspiring mind of enlightenment. And then second part of verse 23, and continued in the general trainings of a Bodhisattva. And then going to the next verse, I train step by step in the training is making the pledge of the engaging mind of enlightenment. So we said that also you can take it in one ceremony, and this is what His Holiness the Dalai Lama has been doing, and I think that this is also the way that we've done it before. So I think that probably we're used to ceremony that combines them too. I can't remember ever being through a ceremony where we had, first of all, taking the aspiring man of enlightenment, and then another separate ceremony for the engaging man of
And you take
enlightenment.
high strength tantra, there is like you take the aspiring also
Really?
engaging.
I don't know, it could be. Kind of, I've never noticed it. Thought that kind of, okay, I have to look at it. Yeah. Yeah, could be. I mean, I guess there are also different
ones.
Yeah, different empowerments that have different manuals. Then one for the preparation, one for the actual. Yeah, could be done maybe in High Circuit Tantra, but anyway, I can't recall any situation that I've been to in which they were given separately in different rituals. So. Just to add to that, let's look at one point that Khenpo Kunpa makes in his commentary. In section 100, it says, according to the master Sagara Mega, that through the first repetition, you receive the precepts of bodhicitta, of aspiration. This is interesting because we haven't spoken about precepts that are specific to aspiring bodhicitta. When you take upon yourself aspiring bodhicitta through a ceremony, you don't take the bodhisattva vow, right? So you're making a pledge basically in front of Buddhas and bodhisattvas to attain enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. After all, you visualize in front of you all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and also the Lamas and so forth. So you make a pledge in their presence, but it is not a vow. I think maybe it's an important distinction to make, right? So it's not a vow because the Bodhisattva vow is only the engaging vow. It's not the aspiring vow. So you're making a promise, and then the promise is to train in wishing bodhicitta, and there are certain trainings, maybe actually we'll look at them tomorrow and the day after, that prevents the deterioration of bodhicitta in this life, and then those that prevent the deterioration of bodhicitta in future lives. So those things, I guess that many of you have had them before. You train in avoiding the black dhammas and in cultivating the white dhammas, right? So those, certain things that you need to do in order to make sure that the mind of enlightenment does not decline in this life and also future life. So they're explained mostly with respect to the aspiring mind of enlightenment. So here in Khenpo Kunpa's commentary says, so the first repetition, you receive the precepts bodhicitta of aspiration. Then through the second, you receive the precepts of bodhicitta of application, which means the engaging vow. And through the third, you stabilize both sets of precepts. It's an interesting explanation because when you recite those two verses, you are saying the lines that pertain both to the aspiring and to the engaging mind of enlightenment. So although you're repeating those two verses, the lines that pertain to the aspiring and engaging mind of enlightenment, here this master says, well, actually the first time, in the first repetition, you make the pledge of the aspiring. In the second repetition, you're making the pledge or you receiving the precepts of the engaging bodhicitta. And for the third one, you lock it in. You stabilizes both sets of precepts. Since it is explained like this, you must generate the confidence of having received the precepts, because you must be diligent in training in bodhicitta in this way. Taking the bodhicitta precepts at all times and in circumstances is extremely important. Therefore, be diligent in it. So particularly, if, I think that for many of us who have this 6-session Guru Yoga commitment, where we recite it in the morning and in the evening, mostly, I think that someone told me that they do it 6 times a day anyway, or they try to do it also.
Yeah.
Yeah. So someone recently told me that they do it. I thought that's pretty great. Anyway, so it's good to try to think about it like that you cement the aspiring bodhicitta. Again, you commit yourself to engaging bodhicitta, including developing the wish to train in the trainings, and then you stabilize it. Kind of, you become sure that you have both aspiring and engaging bodhicitta, just like Master Sagara Mega explained. So then, today Geshe-la started off with explaining the meaning of then practice its stages of graded development, followed in trainings for all Buddha children, so may too for the sake of beings, develop bodhicitta, and follow the trainings exactly as all Bodhisattvas have done. So today Geshe-la started off with explaining the meaning of training in stages, right? Step by step or gradually training. So he explained it in the following way. He said that first of all, training aspiring bodhicitta. Then you train in engaging bodhicitta, and you increase it more and more. I mean, it seems that there's no training. It seems to me that there's no training in engaging bodhicitta that is separate to engaging in the trainings of bodhisattvas. The trainings of bodhisattvas are the 6 perfections. So when you train in the 6 perfections properly, you do it in having the vow in your mind, but also you train it with thinking that I'm doing this at the moment in order to attain the state of enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So you're combining both the engaging bodhicitta and the practice of the 6 perfections. So it's, in that sense, it's not that first of all you train in engaging bodhicitta, and after that you engage in the deeds. You do them at the same time. Does it make sense?
But only if you have taken the vow.
Yeah, only if you have taken the vow.
Because a lot of people take refuge and say that they haven't taken Bodhisattva.
Yeah. I mean, you can, first of all, you can take refuge and then practice the deeds of bodhisattvas. We can say you practice the perfections, although in actual sense it would not be the actual practice of the perfection. But you can still say that I'm practicing now giving and ethics and patience and so forth. You know, sometimes just in a loose sense, we say that we're practicing the perfection of, but actually to practice the perfection of something, it needs to be done with bodhicitta, right? So you can practice giving.
Training.
Sorry?
Is it training if you haven't had the
Well, let's say that you,
training?
I mean, I think that, you know, probably for many of us, you know, even though we have taken refuge, we also study bodhicitta, and we also we meditate on bodhicitta. At least I have to say that on a personal level, not every act of giving, although I think that this is a virtuous thing to do, not in every act of giving, I think that I'm doing it for the sake of attaining enlightenment, for the sake of all sentient beings, you know. So it is giving, but is it a perfection of giving if I'm not thinking of good?
Geshe-la said one time that if you set your motivation in the morning, then whatever you do,
Yeah.
even sleeping and so forth, is with the mind of enlightenment.
Yeah, and
So that you don't have to think about it necessarily in every action.
yeah, and also there was you remember that there were 2 modes of explanations of engaging bodhicitta. So Gyatso Dhamma Rinchen and also Jitsumpa follows the explanation that says that you need to have the vow. That the mind of enlightenment has to be explicit in your mind stream.
In order to practice the.
Then engaging mind of enlightenment.
In order to practice the perfection of the perfections. No, that's not right. Yeah. I remember that the distinction that they made.
Well, they said that in order to have the engaging mind of enlightenment, the mind of enlightenment has to be explicitly present to the practice of the perfection. It has to explicitly qualify the practice of the deeds. Whereas Geshe said, drawing from the commentary of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he says that actually once you've taken the vow, you'll have the engaging mind of enlightenment. So whether it is manifest or non-manifest would be the engaging mind of enlightenment. So there were two modes of explanations. So it seems that according to that, you can practice giving with an explicit mind of enlightenment, or you can practice giving once you've taken the vow, and that's, there would be two different distinctions that will be made.
However, if you did it with a miserly attitude or some worldly concern, then I think that would cancel it out.
So this is also something that I wanted to bring up in following up the discussion that we had in the previous week. So maybe I'll put this.
Unconscientious is okay, but being deliberately antithetical.
I'll just find the relevant verse. All right, I'll share it on the screen. So in the previous week, we briefly touched upon all these beings wants happiness. In the 10th verse out of Chandrakirti's supplement to the Milway, in chapter number 1, 10th verse number 10, which explains why the Buddha taught giving first. And he said that it says that all these beings want happiness, but human happiness does not occur without resources. Knowing that resources arise from giving, the Muni first discoursed on that. And then, interestingly, verse 11 says, even for beings with little compassion, brutal and intent on their aims, desired resources arise from giving, causing extinguishment of suffering. So it seems that the implication here is that you can also have an unconscientious or non-virtuous way of giving. Like, for example, if you're seeking your own reputation, if you're seeking your own fame, or as it says here, even those who have little compassion or brutal and intent on their own aim, they receive desired resources from giving, causing extinguishment of their suffering. So it seems that you can here speak of through giving, you can accumulate merit that will result in resources, but it's not necessarily going to be a virtuous way of giving. And it's interesting, it seems that it's not explicitly stated here, but it seems that almost like you can speak about a positive action that is not a virtuous action. I mean, it's not stated like that.
It could be a positive result.
Yeah.
It would be a lot weaker.
Yeah.
Well, to me, it describes capitalism. We give people jobs, we give people a wage. It's not done out of kindness necessarily. But yet we are giving people a livelihood, and that's not our.
But it's saying you get resources by giving.
Our primary motivation.
I mean, it's like,
They get wealthy.
I mean, it's kind of interesting. You can say that when you look at, I think, ways that I think at least early missionaries used to work, or maybe even current missionaries, with providing people with food and wealth and money in order to convert them, so it wasn't a total act of charity. There was a hidden agenda within it. I mean, it wasn't even hidden, right? So even such actions will result in resources for the giver. So let's look at that. So then there's a question here that was kind of my notes in drawing from Lama Tsongkhapa's illumination of the thought. So must the giver accord with proper ways in order to attain marvelous resources from giving gifts? The answer to that qualm that Lama Tsongkhapa puts forward is, it is not necessary, even for those with little compassion who are brutal in their treatment of others. Giving serves as a cause of extinguishing the suffering of hunger, thirst, and so forth by bringing marvelous resources.
Try another example of karma is infallible. The cause will bring about an effect.
So karma is infallible. Sorry. Yeah, the cause will necessarily bring about its effect. Yeah, I think that I agree with you, but I think that what it highlights is that we say that sometimes that the motivation is the main factor that determines whether a certain action is a virtuous action. But it seems that this is a case in which the motivation is not actually totally virtuous, isn't it? It's like you can think that I want to be famous. I want to outshine everyone else in terms of my reputation. So I'm going to give charity, in order to be.
And let everyone know how much I get.
Yeah, and then anyone will know how much I give. So it seems that here the motivation is half of the motivation to be virtuous, but still the result is a positive result.
I guess that we had that with the bushfires, where the celebrities got on board and they were sort of goading each other to give. So it wasn't, I mean, maybe it was from a pure motivation to say, come on, put out your hand as well. But, yeah, it's a sort of,
I guess it's
a
a
little bit
mixed
uncomfortable.
motivation.
Yeah, mixed motivation. Yeah, I think that often when we are asked about a motivation for doing a particular thing, like sometimes people ask me about, for example, what was my motivation for ordaining. It's hard to actually pull out one thing that is a motivation.
Yeah.
It's often when we think of different things that we do, it's a combination of motivations. Particularly, I think that in the previous week we mentioned disrobing. I think that sometimes when someone is giving a reason why they disrobe, it's more like we try to narrow it down to one reason, but actually it's a combination of different things. It's hard to really work out what exactly was the motivation. It's actually, the situation is much more complicated. So I think that with virtuous actions, with non-virtuous actions, we try to delineate it, narrow it down to one thing, but it's often more complicated than that. It's not simple. Anyway, then in verse 12 in the supplement, it says, even those bereft of compassion but intent on giving, looking after their own happiness in the sense of diminishing suffering, quickly attend a meeting with a superior being while they give. So verse 12 says, this is actually my summary from Lama Tsongkhapa's explanation. Through giving, even they will quickly attend a meeting with a superior being. Then they will cut the continuum of cyclic existence, going to the peace caused by meeting a superior. Yeah. And then we have the Bodhisattva's giving, thus bearing in mind a promise to help beings attain happiness from giving before too long. For those merciful and those not so, only discourse on giving is therefore chief. How do we get to talk about giving?
The first thing that I was taught, so
yeah.
I mean the first,
Anyway, actually, so we got off on these tangents from speaking of the gradual trainings of bodhisattvas, right? So first of all, aspiring bodhicitta, then engaging bodhicitta. Then there are a couple of, so Geshe spoke about doing that in order. I think that we can add to that, when you look at the way that Lama Tsongkhapa explains the practice of the perfections in his Lamrim Chemo, he speaks about a gradual training where you, first of all, train in the thought, and you always aiming in your thought or wishes to do better. Like, for example, it says with respect to the perfection of ethics, it says, for the time being, take whatever you can take. Don't take what you cannot take upon yourself, what you cannot commit to. Take what you can commit to at the time being, but in your mind, aspire to hold higher discipline. So, for example, if you're a lay person, Lama Tsongkhapa says, just kind of looking at the spirit of what it says, if you're a lay person, take the lay vow, but in your mind kind of think that in the future, should my circumstance change and I can do it, seek to receive ordination. If you're a then person, if you're a novice, then seek to think that in the future I want to do better. I want to hold full ordination. So I'm glad that you concur. And also, with giving, so you can give what you can now, and think that in the future I want to do more. If I can give more in the future, I'll do that. But don't give what you cannot give at the moment, because if you come to regret it later on, you're kind of nullifying your own giving. Isn't it? All right, so that's a gradual training. There was also a point in Khenpo Kumpel's commentary. Let's see if it's relevant or not. Where is it? It's here. So it here kind of says that this Shakyapas explain it in one way, then the Nigmas explain it in this way. The Nigmas explain it in a way that I think is similar to what we were speaking of. In regard to our own tradition, the Nigma, because Khenpo Kumpel's was a Nigmapa. The Subao Pariparcha Sutra, the sutra requested by Subao, says, from time to time, little by little. Therefore, since one is not able to train in the ocean-like conduct of the Bodhisattvas from the outset, one is clearly instructed to train in the precepts of the Bodhisattva by stages. So I think that that's completely in line with what Lama Tsongkhapa says. Do what you can now. Have the thought of doing better.
It has a different interpretation of occasions.
Yeah.
It's a really nice way of saying it.
Yeah. I'll try to look at what the Dutan Dusu. Well, in Tibetan is Dutan Dusu. Like rather than from time to time, it's in time. And when you're actually doing it, it's more like, it's not from time to time, it's not occasionally. It's more like over time, let's say. Over time, maybe that's the word to do it, over time. So over time, little by little. Therefore, since one is not able to train in the ocean-like conduct of bodhisattvas from the outset, one is clearly instructed to train in the precepts of the bodhisattva by stages. In the Shiksha Samuchaya, that's Shantideva's compendium of training, it is said, training by stages in accordance with one's capacity in the precepts of the bodhisattvas. One's capacity to keep the precepts will get better and better. To that, we can also, I think, add the stages of training in the perfections, right? So although we want to practice all the perfections, they're still presented in a certain way, because it is said that, first of all, the Buddha discussed on giving, as we said, because human beings need resources in order to be happy, need to be well. But on top of that, giving reduces miserliness. And if our miserliness is reduced, then we can keep ethics in a proper way. If we keep ethics in a proper way, then we will abstain from harming others on the basis of that harm, which means that we'd be able to better practice patience, which does not harm others or does not retaliate. If we're able to practice patience, then we can also persevere in practicing joyous effort. And if we practice joyous effort, we have a good basis for persevering with absorption. And if we practice absorption, then our mind will be focused in the practice of wisdom. Now, so this is the way that this is one explanation of the order of the perfections. So you can also think about this as what should be your priority now, in a sense that, of course, in our practice, we want to practice all the bits of the perfections and each of the perfection within each one of the perfections. But still, we can look at our priorities. How do we prepare our mind in the best possible way for the practice of wisdom? To develop our mind in the best possible way to the practice of wisdom, we need to have all the other things in place. And the same thing applies also particularly to the training in concentration that is calm abiding, right? So when we hear about calm abiding, I think that many of us get really enthused about it. Now, particularly when it says that you can attain calm abiding within the span of 6 months. Now, it sounds like, at least comparing to other things, this is manageable. But when you look at the prerequisites for that, also explained by Lama Tsongkhapa and Lama Rinpoche, it says that apart from having a suitable place and a suitable companionship and so forth, it says that you need to have ethical discipline, you need to have lesser desire, you need to be more content. How hard it is it to do that? And it seems that in order to be more content, to have lesser desire, to have ethical discipline, you need to kick ass in the practice of the perfection of giving and also in ethical discipline. So it's not easy at all, is it? So Jason says, what's the difference between generating joy and bliss, or are they synonymous? I think that the word for happiness in Tibetan is sometimes translated as bliss, which in English sounds like a greater form of happiness, like ecstasy. Right? Do you agree that bliss sounds like, this? So I would tend to say you generate joy and happiness rather than joy and bliss. But I guess that it says that bodhisattvas get overjoyed when they hear the request to give. When they hear give me, they immediately become filled with joy. So for them, it's probably more like bliss. It's more than just being happy, I think.
Which is Dechen.
Yeah, like Dechen.
Happiness as well as bliss.
Yeah, Dechen is actually, big happiness, great happiness. Dechen is more like bliss.
Oh, so it's not
Blissful, blissful Dechen. Are you blissful now? No, not in the moment. Not particularly now. All right.
Can I just say something that I've just been thinking that it's kind of ironic that the Buddha says that from resources comes happiness. And now Shantideva is teaching us that if we give everything away, we reach the state beyond sorrow. So it's kind of ironic, yeah.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, we need resources, but actually to reach the state beyond sorrow, we need to give everything away.
Yeah, and actually, there's something slightly connected with that in the secondary offenses that I thought of covering today. So one of them says that if you have an opportunity of, maybe we've covered it before, doing too little for the sake of others, in the sense that if you think that, for example, as an ordained, I should just focus on guarding my vow in the Vinaya, and that diminishes your engagement with the benefit of others. Like, for example, if you have an ability to have more resources so that you can spend them on others, and you choose not to do it because you think that what I need to do is just God to live simply, it is a secondary offense of doing too little for the sake of others. Of course, it doesn't mean to say that we need to now give everything away, kind of give our training away and focus on amassing wealth so that we can give it to others. But no, if you have I think a situation, a particular situation where you can have more so that you can spend more, and you choose not to do it, then it's doing too little for the sake of others. But it's also, you can say, with respect to the point that you made, through giving you attain nirvana, but you also need to give away everything to attain nirvana. I think that through giving, my mind will transcend sorrow. So you can probably understand it, kind of, I'm thinking out loud. You can probably say that through giving, my mind will transcend sorrow, in that on a temporary level, in the interim, when through giving, when you reduce your attachment, your mind becomes less and less, you have less and less of the pain of attachment, the discomfort of attachment. And at the end, through giving, you're able to practice all the other things, ethics, patience, and so forth, so that will lead you to nirvana. Yeah. Anyway, I don't think that what I said is different to what you said.
No, I just think
Yeah.
it's cool.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So another thing that I wanted to mention is, let's look at the verses that we've covered today. So we spoke of this actual. Today we also we began the concluding activities. First of all, rejoicing by eulogizing the mind, or by lifting the mind up, becoming inspired or enthused. So verse 26 and then verse 27 are also found in a different way, or they're translated differently in a 6-session Guru Yoga. So section A5 and A6. At this moment, my life has become truly fruitful. For having attained and endowed you with body, today I've developed a true Buddha essence, Bodhicitta, and thus have become Buddha's child. So that's verse 26. And 27, applying now any skilled means whatsoever, may I always accord what I do with this essence. Then in brackets, that's an addition of the translator, and follow the actions of all Buddha's children. May I never confuse with this pure, faultless essence, again, another edition of the translator, any teaching that lack this enlightening thought. Right, so these are verses 26 and 27. So Geshe touched today upon, today my life has become fruitful. The human existence was well attained. Today I was born into the Buddha's family, right? So I wanted to just touch upon the word family. And then in the next verse, from now on, I shall, as much as possible, engage in the actions befitting this lineage. So the word for family and lineage is the same word in Tibetan. It's the word is rik. Yeah, so sometimes we speak about Buddha nature, right? Buddha nature, Buddha lineage, Buddha family. All of them are the same word in Tibetan, translated differently in English, but all of them have the same meaning. So the word accords with the application in the old Indian system and also contemporary Indian system, where the class system has been strictly observed. So first of all, in the family life, by the way, your profession, both in India, but I think that also in original Tibet, was determined according to your father's profession, right? So if you're born to a shoemaker, you'd become a shoemaker. I think that it has been like that for centuries also in European culture, right? So if you're born into, if your father was a shoemaker, a dressmaker, and so forth, it is likely that you would have taken up the same profession. also the caste system in India was determined according to the male. In Tibetan families, for example, it is also the family type, or the family caste, because there is also a caste system in Tibetan culture, not observed everywhere, but in many parts of Tibet, but in some sense also slightly different in different places in Tibet. But there's still a caste system also in Tibetan culture. So it is also determined according to their father. It's interesting, kind of, when Tibetans marry outside of Tibetan culture or Tibetan people, if a Tibetan guy marries a foreign woman, non-Tibetan woman, their child is considered Tibetan. If a Tibetan woman marries a non-Tibetan, the child is not considered to be Tibetan. So it's also, I mean, of course, different people might view it differently. I think that now Tibetan society is changing, but in general, this is how Tibetan society views the whole issue of lineage. So in the same way, from a spiritual perspective, we have the lineage that determines which system we follow. So you have the lineage of a here, the lineage of a solitary realizer, and also a Buddha lineage. So the same word also is translated as family. So if you think about, for example, what determines your family type, like the caste system or profession or what have you, you have the here family, solitary realizer's family, and the Buddha's family. In Maitreya's Ornament for Clear Realization, in the first chapter, he mentions the lineage, and then when you study the perfection system in the first chapter, there is an explanation of the lineage. So the definition of lineage is a Dhamma that is suitable to become a Buddhakaya. Right? A Dhamma that is suitable to become a Buddhakaya. So there is a certain potential. There's a certain potential for becoming a Buddha's body, either Dhammakaya or Rupakaya. This is what a lineage is. So once we develop bodhicitta, we have this Buddha lineage that can become a Buddhakaya, a Buddha body. We need now to develop that lineage, that potential. So then in looking at those two verses, today my life has become fruitful. The human existence was well attained. Now I was born into a Buddha's family. I have a Buddha nature. Today, now I have become a child of a Buddha. From now on, I shall, as much as possible, engage in the actions befitting this lineage, which means only actions that fit this Buddha lineage or Buddha potential, not actions that will corrupt or that will sully this Buddha potential. So actions that can corrupt or sully this Buddha potential would be actions that are motivated by cherishing ourselves. So it could be either negative actions, killing, stealing, and so forth, or you can also do a particular thing, even a positive thing, but with an attitude of self-interest. Like, for example, giving for the sake of your own interest. That would also be something that will corrupt, that will sully a Buddha potential. Any questions? Another thing, the last thing that I wanted to mention with respect to what we've covered today, we have here, after that, rejoicing in having created the rare mind, so we spoke about that. Then we have achieving the purpose of others, how it eliminates mental suffering. it's interesting. In the first chapter, we spoke of the benefits of bodhicitta. I think that we can add that to the benefits of bodhicitta in a meditation on the benefits of bodhicitta. I think that it's not that it is different to what was said in the first chapter. Like, for example, the last one says it destroys specifically the suffering of the lower realms. So I think that in the first chapter, when we spoke about the benefits of bodhicitta, we spoke of bodhicitta as eliminating the suffering of sentient beings, right? Then today, the last thing that we've covered was eliminating the afflictive obscurations and eliminating the obscurations to knowledge. And Geshe-la made that comment that in order to eliminate afflictive obscurations, we need to develop the antidote to grasping at a self, the actual antidote to grasping at a self. What is the actual antidote to grasping at a self? Wisdom realizing emptiness, yeah. So wisdom realizing emptiness will be that which destroys afflictive obscuration. But here it says that the mind of enlightenment is the best remedy for afflictive obscurations. It's also the best remedy for cognitive obscurations. So how would you explain that?
It's a much powerful mind.
So there is much more powerful mind. But if you just develop bodhicitta, even if it's beneficial, will you be able to rid yourself of afflictive and cognitive obscurations?
I see this. If you are completely cherishing others and not yourself, then the view of yourself is not confused with the view of yourself anymore, completely direct with others. So therefore you are undermining yourself.
So you're saying that if you completely condition yourself to cherishing others, then you'll no longer be grasping so strongly at yourself. You'll be solely focused on others, and that will also diminish. Yeah, self-cherishing cannot arise. So then it will also diminish your self-grasping ignorance.
I always thought that the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta, and the wisdom, understanding, emptiness. There is no such thing as the inherently existing self. The same, but they're from different angles. One is a logical dependent arising that you come to that that self is not an inherent existing. There's no such thing as an inherent existing self, as opposed to the mind of enlightenment, which is, as Sheriff said, that when you are cherishing others, and to the point where you have bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, then that there is the self-grasping, the self-cherishing is just not there anymore. So they're both an enlightened mind, but one that has gotten that by different angles. And that's why it's so powerful that when you have achieved, when you understand both ways, that is the ultimate, wisdom, omniscience, that's ultimate omniscience. But either way, they are emptiness, but just from different angles.
Well, I wouldn't explain it like that because they are totally different to each other. I mean, one of them is focused on emptiness, and the other one is focused on enlightenment. So both of them are called bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, but it's not that they the same in operating from different perspectives. They're
realizing something different.
Yes, they realize something different, but they can inform each other. They can support each other. I mean, this is what we want to do. It's not that they can. This is what we are working towards in our practice. So we want to develop ultimate bodhicitta that is inspired by conventional bodhicitta. So, but still, when I kind of pull out different things that you guys have said here, and also Paul says, I think you need to conjoin method and wisdom. That's not Paul. Bodhicitta is a motivation for attaining a perceptual realization of emptiness. So combining it with also what the two of you said, I think that when you develop conventional bodhicitta, and you focus on others, I think that indeed it kind of takes away that strong focusing on yourself. But also, in order to realize emptiness, you need to have an immense merit. The mind of enlightenment creates that great merit. I guess you can accumulate quicker the accumulation of merit that is required in order to realize emptiness, but also it is a much more powerful realization of emptiness.
That's what we're discussing in the discussion.
Okay. So this is what you've been discussing in the discussion group. And then if you accumulate the accumulation of merit quicker, it also becomes a stronger accumulation of merit because of the strength of the mind of enlightenment. You have the ability to eliminate cognitive obscurations. Right? So cognitive obscurations are eliminated by Mahayanists also through a realization of emptiness. But
you also need all the accumulation of all perfections to
yeah. So what gives it the power to destroy cognitive obscurations is the merit side that is accumulated through the practice of the 6 perfections through the mind of enlightenment. So Avis is saying yes, because ultimate bodhicitta is the direct realization of emptiness. Correct. Jason says, I think you need to conjoin method and wisdom. Correct. And Paul says he has 2 questions. What is the significance of the meaning of perfection as in the 6th perfection? Could you mention again the different translations? Second, in verse 29, could we understand this as connected to blessings of a Buddha being spontaneous? Well, let's look at the first question. So the meaning of perfection, first of all, the word for perfection in Tibetan is parul tu chimba. So this word parul tu chimba is explained in 2 ways. One perspective speaks of perfecting, and the other one is having perfected. So there is a debate between when do we have the perfection? Do we have the perfection? Can we have the perfection now? Suppose that we were bodhisattvas. Right? Suppose that we were bodhisattvas. Suppose that we were high-level bodhisattvas, bodhisattvas abiding on the ground. Do we have the perfection of generosity? Do we have the perfection of ethics? So Lama Tsongkhapa's explanation to that in his Illumination of the Thought is saying that, and I think that this, as far as I remember, this is what he's saying. So when you attain, for example, the first ground, you attain the higher practice of the perfection of generosity, but you haven't attained the perfection of generosity. When you attain the second ground, you attain the higher practice of the perfection of ethics. So what we can have is a higher practice of a certain perfection. So we are practicing a perfection, but we haven't perfected it, because it will become perfected only once we become Buddha. So the meaning of perfection in Tibetan, parul tu chimba, is to go to the other side. So the other side is the side of Buddhahood. So now we're, for example, practicing, suppose that we are the first ground Bodhisattva. We are practicing the higher practice of the perfection of generosity, right? So it is a practice of the perfection, but it is not the perfection. We do that, and through practicing the higher practice of the perfection of generosity, when we become Buddha, it will be perfected. We will use that in order to cross to the other side, which is the side of Buddhahood, which means that it is giving that has crossed to the side of Buddhahood. The same thing with ethics, with the perfection of ethics. So currently we might be practicing the higher practice of the perfection of ethics if we're a second ground Bodhisattva. But then when we reach Buddhahood, it will be ethics that have crossed to the other side, to the side of Buddha, which means that it will have been perfected ethics. We will have perfected generosity. We will have perfected patience and so forth. In English, it's harder to make that distinction just because the way that we work with the English language. So we call it the perfection of something, but in Tibetan it could be understood as either perfecting generosity or perfected generosity. Both of them could be implied by the word in Tibetan. So, second in verse 29. Let's look at.
28, corrected.
Okay, verse 28. All right, let's look at verse 28. Just like a blind person finding a jewel in a heap of rubbish, it generates this mind of enlightenment just by coincidence. So the question is, could you mention again, second in verse 28, could we understand this as connected to the blessings of a Buddha being spontaneous? I suppose so.
To Shannon, or the ongoing question in the morning.
The commentary said that he only found bodhicitta through the blessings of Buddha.
Okay. So the commentary says that you can only find bodhicitta through the blessings of Buddha. The mind of enlightenment was born from me by pure chance, just like a poor and destitute blind person finding a jewel in a heap of rubbish by sheer coincidence. It must have been through the force of the Buddhas. I guess that you can connect it with, I think, something that I've mentioned before, that a proof for the existence of Buddha lineage is given in Maitreya's Sublime Continuum, is that the Dhammakayas of the Buddha is all pervasive, in that it engages the mind stream of sentient beings. Still, the statement is a bit difficult. I find it kind of, at least me, I don't understand it completely, what it means that the Dhammakaya is spontaneous and engaging all sentient beings, but also that.
Is it by bringing out the blessing? Because the blessings of Buddha come through virtue. Oh, the virtues are said to be blessings.
All virtues are said to be blessings of the Buddha. They're also considered to be actions of the Dhammakaya. I think that sometimes we say that Buddhas are acting for the sake of sentient beings. So they're issuing forth the enlightened activities, but they can only engage sentient beings if sentient beings provide them with the hook for those Buddha activities to hook onto, or Buddha's compassion to hook onto, right? So the hook is provided by us generating faith, for example, but the very foundation of that is the nature of the mind being clear light, or in other words, the suchness of the mind. Because the mind is empty of inherent existence, we can develop virtues such as faith that can hook on the Buddha's activities.
Hook on, did you say?
Hook on. Hook. Like a hookah. Sorry. Just kind of slotted in. So Christine is saying, so practicing the Brahma Vihara in Pali traditions is only aid of accruing merit. Do we think? Just wondering. So the Brahma Vihara are the immeasurables. The four immeasurables are considered to be the abodes of Brahma. This is how they're called in the Buddhist language. So there are aids of accruing merit, but I think that there are also aids, if you do them in a Mahayana way, there are also aids for enriching, increasing, and so forth the mind of enlightenment, which is also for accruing merit or strengthening your merit. You can do that, to, as we said, we call it complete the collection. So make it powerful enough to be supportive of the accumulation of wisdom, so that using the tool, we can become Buddhas. since our time is up, we haven't spoken about the secondary offenses, but I guess that you can forgive me. You will forgive me. Thank you. Let's put the dedication prayers on the screen. Gewadi Nyududa Lama Sangye Druyune Drowachi Kyamalupa De Salagopa Sho Chacho Sancho Rinpoche Makye Pananke Gyochi Kyepanyampa Mepaya Gone Gondo Pewa Sho Kangrira Wekawe Shinkam Pendan Dewa Malu Chuene Chenre Siwan Tenzin Getso Shape Site Badu Tengyochi Tu tu jan xin chang gun Yahweh ten zing kyung ten wei cho sung ko wei le mon tu tu pa da so du je kon du sha ten shu. Thank you.
Thanks, Carlton.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend
Thank you.
Carlton.
Thank you very much, Reverend Carson. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.